Hi, I'm Reverend Patricia Adams Farmer, pastor of Millersburg Christian Church, and my sermon for today during the pandemic is called It All Hangs on This. It is based on Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 through 40. Remember those book reports we had to do in school? Oh, I remember endless reports on books that I checked out at the school library, and later in college too. A book report or paper always included a summary of the book, the essence of the book, which was not so easy. I remember having to do a report on Tolstoy's War and Peace, which is, of course, the fattest book in history. Now, how do you summarize such a book? That's why they invented Cliff Notes, which tells you exactly what the book is about even without reading it. I wonder how many books go unread in the face of such temptation, which I admit I finally succumbed to in the case of War and Peace. In Jesus' day, all the books of the Hebrew people, the Torah and the prophets, were the purview of the Pharisees. They were the experts in Jewish law and wanted to remain so. So they tried to trip up this upstart rabbi named Jesus with questions, one of them being the question that was subject of endless debate. Which law is the greatest? Jesus must have paused for a moment or two. This was surely a trick question coming from the Pharisees, who were trying to pull Jesus into their controversies and arguments over Jewish law. Jesus didn't answer the question the way they thought he would. He took this question as an assignment to summarize the entire Jewish law. And what an assignment. And that was before Cliff Notes were invented. Can you imagine if the teacher gave you that assignment to summarize the entire Bible or even just the Old Testament? That makes War and Peace look like a short story. Can it really be done? Summarizing the Jewish law? Jesus seems to indicate that it can when he says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. First, love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And secondly, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, it might surprise you to learn that Jesus was not the first person to bring these two commandments together as a summary. Others had already done this. If you look at this in the Gospel of Luke, you will see that it is the lawyer who summarizes the law in this way and not Jesus. So this is not unique to Jesus. What is significant here is Jesus' small but powerful statement at the end. He says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So instead of being drawn in, Jesus takes the heart of God's message to the Jews and says that everything else in the entire Hebrew Bible hangs on this. It hangs on love. But if we think summarizing most of the Old Testament is hard, that's nothing compared to following the greatest commandment. Love is the hardest thing. What does Jesus mean by love? How do we love our neighbor if we can hardly stand our neighbor? And these days, it's getting harder and harder. The great Christian writer Frederick Buechner says, by loving God and your neighbors, Jesus doesn't mean loving as primarily a feeling. Instead, he seems to mean that whether or not any feeling is involved, loving God means honoring and obeying and staying in constant touch with God. And loving your neighbors means acting in their best interests, no matter what, even if personally you can't stand them. Now, it's that last part I like, even if you can't stand them. Ever had a neighbor like that? I have. And ever feel obligated to love them anyway, to act in their best interests no matter what? That's the kind of love Jesus is talking about. It's a commitment to another's well-being, no matter what you feel about them or how they feel about you. I like Buechner's quote because it allows me to act in my neighbor's best interest even while I am complaining about them under my breath. Maybe Jesus believed that if you do that long enough, your feelings will begin to change. Or maybe Jesus doesn't care if your feelings change as long as you act in your neighbor's best interests. It's not about how you feel. It's about what you do day after day after day. It's what Jesus can command us to do. And that's why we need to keep his commandments, because it is the core of the gospel. But what if your neighbor is the wrong color, the wrong sexual orientation? What if your neighbor speaks the wrong language or came from the wrong homeland? What if your neighbor is going to vote for the wrong candidate? What if your neighbor is the wrong candidate? What do I do with them, Jesus? Oh, love them? Are you kidding me? But wait. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. But what if you are one of the countless millions who have low self-esteem and fear that you are unlovable due to some aspect of your life? How do I love God and neighbor if I don't even know how to love myself? And yet Jesus tells us to love God, neighbor, and self with our whole heart. This is the way to God, the fulfillment of the law. Yes, it all hangs on love. I think we'd have a lot more people come to church, especially young people, if they only knew that this was the true heart of our faith. It's not adherence to a dogma or a particular way of worship or anything like that. It's about love. Lavish, inclusive, unconditional, sacrificial love. It's that simple, but it's also that hard. Bigner goes on to say, the love for equals is a human thing, of friend for friend, brother for brother. It is to love what is loving and lovely. The world smiles. The love for the less fortunate is a beautiful thing. The love for those who suffer, for those who are poor, and the sick, the failures, the unlovely. This is compassion, and it touches the heart of the world. The love for the more fortunate is a rare thing. To love those who succeed where we fail, to rejoice without envy with those who rejoice, the love of the poor for the rich, of the black man for the white man. The world is always bewildered by its saints. And then there is the love for the enemy, love for the one who does not love you but mocks, threatens, and inflicts pain. This is God's love, and it conquers the world. So, love is not only the greatest power in the world, but love saves us. Jesus' love for us, our love for others, it saves us. In some cases, it literally saves us. Most of you know the name Corrie ten Boom, whose story, The Hiding Place, has inspired millions. Not many people know of her equally courageous nephew, Peter van Weerden. Now, during the days of the Nazi occupation in Holland, Peter transported Jewish children under the cover of darkness to secret hiding places where they were saved from the Nazis. He was eventually caught and spent several months in prison. After the war, he and his musical family traveled throughout Israel, singing and sharing their love for Jesus Christ. When he had a massive heart attack, they rushed him to Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. The doctor on call that day skillfully saved his life. After he recuperated, Peter expressed his gratitude to the medical staff. When they discussed the Holocaust, the doctor suddenly burst into tears, and so did Peter. For as they compared notes, the doctor revealed that he was one of those children Peter had rescued. Now, years later, their paths had providentially crossed, and one of those whom Peter had saved from extinction was there to save him. Peter van Weerden and Corrie ten Boom have modeled for us the kind of love that will one day save the world. It is a love without boundaries or borders, that makes no distinction with regard to ethnicity or religion or political views or any other distinction. It is love that may or may not include feeling. No one can command us to feel a certain way. That's why we know that the love Jesus was talking about is not a Valentine's Day box of chocolates, but about active commitment to the well-being of others. That's when miracles start happening. Our world can use a miracle right now, as hate and division have only grown more malign and dangerous. The answer is not complicated, it's just hard to practice. Bishop Michael Curry, the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, who you may know as the priest who married Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. He has a new book called Love is the Way, Holding on to Hope in Troubling Times. It came out of that wedding when he said to the royal couple, "Think and imagine a world when love is the way." Because when love is the way, we actually treat each other like we are actually family. When love is the way, we know that God is the source of us all. And when we are brothers and sisters, children of God, my brothers and sisters, that's a new heaven, a new earth, a new world, a new human family. Yes, love is the way. It's the summary of the Bible. It's the summary of Jesus' message, the gospel in a nutshell. As Bishop Curry says, we were made for God and for each other. We need to wake up every morning and say to ourselves, I'm going to do something for God, and I'm going to do something for someone else. With that simple mantra, we see new miracles arise. Yes, everything else can be debated, but nothing is worth anything if it doesn't hang on love. Amen.